Welcome everyone to a brand new series of Let's Play Hearts of Iron 4 Millennium Dawn Turkey with a Turkey Plus sub-mod. Our journey begins in the year 2000, standing once again at the crossroads of continents, as well as the crossroads of two centuries. In this campaign, we're taking control of the Republic of Turkey, a nation proud with a deep history, geopolitical weight, and quite a few problems. This is nothing new, however. I mean, when did Turkey not have problems? In fact, let me start with this. We have played Ottomans in Europa Universalis, Mayo and Taxis campaign, in Victoria II, the Grand Culmination campaign. We played them in Hearts of Iron 4, the Great War, and we played Turkey in Hearts of Iron 4, Black Ice. We have dealt with wars, we have dealt with strife, and we have dealt with losses and, well, even outright defeats. So we know Turkey has problems, because it always has. And now we are back with a campaign that will take us through history of modern Turkey, building upon the complicated situation the country finds itself in the year 2000. But what is it? What is the problem? Well, what was Turkey like at the dawn of the new millennium is a fair question. That is what we are going to be talking about in this episode. Before we deep dive into Turkish politics, foreign relations, economy and military, a few words about how this Let's Play will be structured for those of you new to my playthroughs, as this is going to be pretty familiar to my subscribers. I love roleplay, I always roleplay, and that's the reason why my first episode is always informational. We will not play the game in this episode. Instead, what we are going to do is we're gonna talk about Turkey, what it was in the year 2000 and how it came to be that way, plus a little bit of its near future. Then we will go into the game, discussing various aspects, traits, and other things related to our campaign, and making a plan and a strategy for the near and distant future. The actual gameplay will, as always, start in episode 2, after we have the foundations in place. So if you are familiar with Turkey and the situation it is in, and with the mod, feel free to move to the next episode. For everyone else, let's start. And boy do we have a lot of dark stuff to get through. Turkey is a parliamentary republic, at least on paper, with the real power divided between politicians, military officers, judges, and the occasional wanted mafia-linked nationalists with a state badge and a gun. I wish I was kidding about the last one, but I am totally not. The president at this moment is Süleyman Demirel, a political survivor from the Cold War era who served as a prime minister 6 different times before becoming a president. His term ends later this year, meaning year 2000, and he'll be replaced by Ahmet Necdet Sezer, a no-nonsense, by-the-book constitutional judge who's about to walk into a political minefield where he will promptly cause one of the biggest crises in Turkish history, sending the entire country into a years-long economic meltdown that destroyed the currency and eventually led even to the introduction of the new Turkish lira. But for now, Demirel sits at top, not exactly beloved, but respected for his resilience in a system addicted to chaos. Why chaos? Well, to be completely honest, Turkish highest power levels were in what can be only called constant state akin to a knife fight in a phone booth. Just between 1991 and 2002, there were 10 governments. 10 in 11 years. Coalitions were forming only to break within a few months, in many cases never even gaining majority, in others being so dysfunctional that they couldn't even formulate a plan to gain it. The fact that our current ruling three-party coalition is ideologically incoherent should thus come as no surprise. It combines leftist secularists, hardcore nationalists, and free market conservatives. So let's have a look at them, shall we? First, there is the Democratic Left Party, or the SP, led by Bülent Ecevit, our Prime Minister. He's a seasoned secular nationalist from the old guard, famous for ordering the 1974 invasion of Cyprus and, more recently, the man who delivered Abdullah Öcalan, the PKK leader, to justice in 1999. That capture made him a hero and his party surged, but that popularity is already fading. Don't worry, we will get to the whole PKK thing later, you can believe that. Second, there is a Nationalist Movement Party, or MHP, far-right, ultra-nationalist, fiercely anti-Kurdish party steeped in the mythos of the Turkish deep state. Led by Devlet Bahçeli, they're part of the reason that government is so hardline on internal security. And last, the Motherland Party, or NAAP, neoliberal, center-right, and increasingly irrelevant. Once dominant under Turgut Özal, now just clinging to power through deals and backroom compromises. It is worth mentioning that all three coalition parties were eliminated from Turkish parliament in 2002 elections, with DSP and NAAP completely imploding, and MHP returning later as an ultra-nationalistic, if irrelevant, alternative to AKP, which ruled Turkey since 2002. The takeaway from this is that our government is not connected by anything but fear. The fear of political Islam, the fear of Kurdish separatism, the fear of losing control to the EU, the US, the military, or each other. And to this, the fact that every major party is haunted by corruption scandals, bloated bureaucracies, and deep connections to organized crime. And you get a state that looks stable on the outside, but is held together by prayers and threats. Well, actually, a state that doesn't look stable to anyone. And that is not all. You have probably noticed that I spoke about the military several times already, which is not common in this section dedicated to politics. But in Turkey, well, it works a little bit differently, because behind the politicians we discussed stands the real power, the Turkish armed forces, and the vast shadowy network known as the Derin Devlet, or the deep state. Today the term deep state is something that is connected mostly to conspiracy theories, but it is very much a real thing in case of Turkey. Officially, the military is just another branch of the state as anywhere else, serving the people and the government. However, unofficially, it is the guardian of the republic, especially its sacred cow, laiklik, the Turkish secularism brought on by Ataturk and fiercely guarded since then. The generals have intervened 4 times since 1960 by coup or coercion, and they're always watching what is going on. Most relevant to us, in 1980 they took power completely, abolishing all political parties and establishing a rule of military junta till 1983, after they introduced a new constitution in 1982. And in 1997 they forced an Islamist-led government to resign in what now became known as the postmodern coup. So make no mistake, if this game of politics strays too far from the secularist script, the army may not stay in the barracks, and this is a very, very well modeled in the game itself too, where the army can basically end the game for us. We have to watch them all the time, because they will watch us all the time. As it goes into this first chapter, we need to understand that Turkey in 2000 is still locked in the same existential tug-of-war that's defined it for decades, if not centuries. Secular Kemalist versus religious conservatives, urban elites versus rural traditionalists, and leftist reformers versus right-wing nationalists. And in the middle, well, the public that's angry, cynical, and tired. This is, by the way, if you ever wondered how the Islamist movement got back to power in 2002, even though they were systemically suppressed for the better part of a century. This collapsing system is what allowed Recep Tayyip Erdogan to gain so much power and erode the rest of the system with ease and finesse. In this year though, he is still swinging in the shadows, banned from participating in politics. But if we don't do anything, he's gonna come. Now, let's talk economy. Or more accurately, let's talk debt, inflation, IMF bailouts, and the miracle that almost was. To understand 2000, you need to know where we're coming from. Turkey suffered a major economic crisis in 1994, a classic crash, which means skyrocketing inflation, currency devaluation, shrinking GDP, and a sudden collapse of consumer confidence. In the aftermath, successive governments tried to fix the economy in any way they could, but because Turkey's politics were so unstable, as we already mentioned, every reform effort was diluted, delayed, or hijacked by various interests. So it is not surprising that the indicators in January 2000 looks like this. The inflation is around 40%, which is down from 70 or 80, which it was before, but is still fairly brutal. The debt to GDP is climbing rapidly. Interest rates are often exceeding 100% to attract foreign capital. Unemployment is rising, especially for younger people and university graduates. And our growth is fragile, erratic, and built more on consumption and credit rather than productivity of the population. The government is basically printing money to survive at this point, while also trying to look respectable to investors in the West. And the average citizen? Well, they're getting poorer fast. One positive piece of news, though, is that in late 1999, Turkey signed a new IMF standby agreement, which was worth $4 billion. It's a stabilization plan designed to cool inflation and bring fiscal discipline. The key features included a crawling peg currency regime. The Turkish lira is now partially fixed to the dollar. Structural reforms that included price liberalization, banking sector cleanup, privatization, and massive cuts in public spending and subsidies. This certainly looked good on paper. Investors calmed down, inflation started dipping. As I mentioned, it's around 40% down from 70 or 80 that it was before, and growth started ticking up. Another major feature of the 2000 economy is privatization. Airlines, telecoms, state banks, steelworks, all were up for sale. And while some of it was necessary to break state monopolies, unfortunately it also created a playground for oligarchs and party-connected businessmen because of the poor laws and lacking institutional oversight. So corruption flourished, deals were made on the table, and public trust collapsed even further. By the time AKP comes to power 2 years later, the public will be so tired of the current economic situation that they'll want anything new. So, what is it all like? Well, it's not all bad. Turkey does have industrial strength in the year 2000. It's not just rugs and kebabs as it's sometimes ridiculed. But we're talking mostly, about things like growing automotive sector, textile manufacturing, shipbuilding, and significant arms production is starting to scale. But the country generally remains import-dependent for energy, high-tech components, and heavy machinery. Its current account deficit is a time bomb masked only by capital inflows and loans. Oh, and speaking of energy, Turkey's natural gas is imported from Russia and Iran, and it's climbing, tying Turkey's economy to its own rivals. What makes things even worse is the inequality. We already touched on this, but cities like Istanbul, Ankara, and Izmir are seeing growth, global investments, and consumer class. But in eastern and southeastern Turkey, poverty is endemic. Infrastructure is collapsing, especially along the border, and schools are underfunded. Hospitals, minimal. This economic divide feeds Kurdish grievances, fuels migration to urban centers, and creates political instability at all levels. If you want to see it for yourself, just look at the growth of Istanbul in the past 25 years. All of this eventually culminated in the 2001 crisis. I do not want to go into too much detail, but we need to know what we are trying to avoid. And also, it's too hilarious not to include here. So, remember the new president we will get during 2000, Ahmet needed Sezer? Well, during a high-level National Security Council meeting between this very president and Prime Minister Bülent Ecevit, President Sezer, a firm constitutionalist, threw a copy of the constitution at Prime Minister Ecevit, criticizing government inaction and corruption. Prime Minister Ecevit then stormed out and held a press conference, claiming a serious crisis of the state. And because the markets interpreted this seemingly symbolic spat as a signal of another political crisis, it completely shattered any investor confidence. Within literal minutes, several $1 billion were wiped off stock market and started a massive, unstoppable capital flight. In the next few months, Turkey fell into one of its worst economic crises ever. The Turkish lira collapsed, losing over 40% of its value within weeks. Interest rates soared to 1,000%, even reaching over 7,000% at one point. The stock market crashed, banks failed, and unemployment surged. Inflation spiked to over 80%, and poverty rates increased dramatically. The Turkish government scrambled to contain the disaster. A 16 billion IMF rescue package was negotiated, and in March 2001, Ecevit appointed Kemal Dervish, a respected World Bank official, as Minister of Economy, who introduced a package of large-scale reforms. It were these reforms that restored international confidence, but caused pain domestically, further increasing unemployment and bankruptcies in the short term. Tying into our previous chapter, it was this crisis that destroyed public trust in the existing political parties, including Ecevit's DSP, the MHP, and ANAP. The ruling coalition fragmented, paralyzed by internal disputes and popular rage that culminated with mass protests erupting across the country while the economy was still utterly broken. The 2002 general elections, held early due to the chaos, resulted in a political earthquake. The Justice and Development Party, the aforementioned AKP, newly founded in 2001 by Recep Tayyip Erdogan, won a sweeping majority. All three coalition parties were wiped out of parliament, and Erdogan became, for the first time, prime minister in 2003, starting the AKP era and a fundamental transformation of Turkish domestic and foreign policy, the impacts of which we see even today. I really wish massive political instability and economic meltdowns were the worst of our problems, but the security situation of Turkey in the year 2000 is almost as bad. It is a country under siege, not in an open war, but locked in a constant state of tension, paranoia, and strategic anxiety. Turkey is surrounded by fragile states, unstable regimes, and old enemies. And inside its own border, well, the fire hasn't really gone out, it is just burning low. Let's start at home. Turkey has been at war, an undeclared internal war, since 1984, when the PKK launched an armed insurgency in the country's southeast, seeking Kurdish autonomy or outright independence. By year 2000, the worst is behind us, but it's not over yet. Over 30,000 people have died so far, soldiers, civilians, and guerrillas. Thousands of villages have been emptied or destroyed, and the southeast remains heavily militarized under constant surveillance and underdevelopment. The capture of Abdullah Öcalan, the PKK leader, in 1999 was a major victory for the Turkish state. It demoralized the PKK organization and opened the door for a temporary ceasefire. But don't be fooled, the PKK is just regrouping, shifting tactics and preparing for a new phase of asymmetric warfare, and their network stretches across Syria, Iraq, and even Europe. This is all very well modeled in the game itself, as you will see, and it can escalate again into a full-on war if we are not careful. Before we move on to other areas, by the way, when researching for this video, I was curious why it is not classified as a civil war. It's always called an internal war or undeclared war, but never a civil war. Well, after spending some time, I managed to narrow it down to two reasons. First, the PKK is and was labeled as a terrorist organization by most of the important players, like the USA, EU, and of course Turkey itself. Second is the control of the narrative. If Ankara allowed the label of civil war, it would imply structural and sovereignty issues, which is something the Turkish government is desperate to try to avoid. Furthermore, speaking of the PKK conflict as civil war would imply parity and legitimacy of both sides, giving credibility to the PKK demands. This is why in all documents I could find about the conflict, it is always labeled as war against PKK or counter-terrorism operation. The parallel to the Armenian genocide is quite palpable. Anyway, moving on. Turkey doesn't just fight the PKK at home. It fights them across the border, deep into northern Iraq, a region that's been outside Baghdad's control since the Gulf War. Under the protection of the US and British no-fly zones, the Kurdish regional government is slowly forming. And while it says it wants peace, many PKK fighters find safe havens in the Kandil Mountains, so Turkey conducts cross-border operations, airstrikes, and ground raids, often without asking permission. This makes Iraq a permanent flashpoint and our Iraqi border a potential hot zone. I have no idea how this particular thing is going to be modeled in the game, but in the real world, this was always just a step away from a full-blown crisis. Another potential problem to the south lies Syria, a hostile regime under Hafez al-Assad. For decades, Syria supported the PKK, hosted its leader Öcalan, and disputed control of the Hatay province, which Turkey annexed in 1939, as we saw in our Black Ice playthrough. In 1998, Turkey downright threatened war and as Syria expelled Öcalan, and it worked, eventually leading to his apprehension and arrest in 1999. But that doesn't mean relations are warm. Syria's army, at least in the real world, is at this point large but outdated, and its intelligence services are highly active along the Turkish border. Any instability in Syria could spill across, and any weakness on our part could invite provocation. I expect this to be a real problem, especially during the Arab Spring. And our last major contestant to the east is Iran, ideological rival, economic partner, and regional competitor. Relations in 2000 are cold but stable. Iran doesn't really support the PKK directly, but it does historically tolerate Kurdish movement, Islamic networks, and cross-border smuggling that Ankara, meaning we, would love to shut down. Iran's influence in Iraq, Syria, and Central Asia is growing, and Turkey is increasingly aware of the Sunni-Shia rivalry simmering just beneath the surface. And while both countries trade gas and goods, they're also playing a very long game of regional chess, of which I'm not really sure what the result is gonna be. Also, this is interesting especially because if you recall that when we played Iran in Millennium Dawn, it was Turkey who attacked us and dragged us into a devastating war that raged on for a number of years, destroying a number of our regions and ending with a casualty of well over 1 million men. I still kinda shiver when I remember that we were able to stop their invasion and turn it around only due to support from a number of allies that provided us with constant supply of equipment. Without them, Turkey would have wiped us out completely. Last but not least, we have to mention Northern Cyprus, which is not exactly our border, but it is a place that we are involved in. So how would I summarize Cyprus? Well, a small island, a symbolic wound, and a potential flashpoint with Greece. Turkey invaded Cyprus in 1974 after a Greek-backed coup that tried to unite Cyprus with Athens. Whether this was a necessary peacekeeping operation or an outright invasion depends on whom you ask. My personal opinion is that it was justified, but significantly disproportionate. No matter what your outlook is, the fact is that since then the island has been divided. The north is being ruled by the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, recognized only by Ankara, as it is nothing more than a puppet state. Furthermore, Turkey maintains a permanent military presence in Northern Cyprus, while Greece supports the south. And because both sides stage regular military exercises, one misstep in the Aegean Sea, one jet straying into a contested airspace, one ship violating a border could trigger a war that neither NATO nor the EU wants to see. On a personal note, I wonder if I will ever see a resolution of the situation in my lifetime. I remember learning about it decades ago in high school, wondering that the situation is just untenable. And look at me today, still holding to the same belief. Oh well, I guess I will never learn. Anyway, when I started writing my notes on Turkey, I always knew I would end up this part on a high note. Because even if politics are fragile and the economy is unstable, there is one institution in Turkey that's consistently large, organized, and deeply respected. Or feared, depending on where you stand. And that is, of course, the Türk Silahlı Kuvvetleri, the Turkish Armed Forces. Not just an army, but a national myth, and sometimes a shadow government. So let's start with the Turkish Land Forces, one of the largest standing armies in NATO, both in 2000 and today. Turkey had over 500,000 active personnel in the year 2000, most of them conscripts. The force is organized into 4 major armies: the First Army, which is on the European side, guarding the Greek border; the Second Army, which is in the southeast, facing Iraq and Syria; Third Army, which is in the east, facing Iran and Armenia; and the Aegean Army, which is on the west coast, prepared for a Cyprus scenario. The doctrine is still largely based on Cold War defense. We have large infantry divisions, heavy artillery support, and armored brigades for shock counterattack. Main problem: much of the equipment in 2000 is outdated. M48 and M60 Patton tanks are still the core of the armed forces. BMPs-1 and old American APCs are the regular used vehicles, and towed artillery with only limited mobile support. Generally, the force is tough, experienced, and battle-hardened, especially from years of counterinsurgency, but is not modern and is not mobile enough for fast-moving regional warfare. As far as the game goes, this representation is fairly good. We have the M60A3s as the main battle tanks, which were produced between 1978 and 1983, being effectively an entire generation behind the current development. Same goes for APCs, and we have no IFVs available as I checked. The army has slightly over 156,000 men in active duty, most of our divisions being mixed brigades of fast-moving vehicles and tanks. Next, we've got the Türk Hava Kuvvetleri, the Turkish Air Force. This is where Turkey really shines, thanks to the close cooperation with the United States, of course. By 2000, Turkey operates over 200 F-16 Fighting Falcons, many of them locally assembled by TAI, Turkish Aerospace Industries. It also flies F-4 Phantoms and F-5s, aging but capable in multi-role and training roles. The air defense is largely based on American supplied radar and ground combat infrastructure. The Air Force is designed to mainly A. Deter Greece, B. Control airspace in southeastern Turkey, C. Strike PKK camps in Iraq, and D. Project limited power in the Aegean and Middle East. Its real-world weakness is mainly modern long-range air-to-ground capabilities, no advanced drone or AWACS, and most importantly, independent logistics and spare parts production is lacking. Turkey is fully dependent on foreign support. Still, in regional terms, it is a top-tier air force and a core part of NATO's southern flank. In-game, this is perfectly represented. We have 240 F-16Cs, 87 F-5s, and 178 F-4E Phantom IIs. We have a few spare Marchetti SF-260 multi-roles and 20 C-130 Hercules heavy-lift aircraft. We have no bombers, no close air support, no naval aircraft, or really anything that we could produce ourselves, which is something that we will need to address, but more about that in-game. Finally, the Türk Deniz Kuvvetleri, or the Navy. In 2000, the Turkish Navy is primarily a defensive coastal fleet, tasked with patrolling the Aegean, the Sea of Marmara, the Eastern Mediterranean, and the Black Sea, through the Montreal-controlled Bosporus. Key assets include several Perry-class ex-US guided missile frigates, German-built Type 209 diesel submarines, a fleet of fast attack craft and corvettes, and amphibious elements for Northern Cyprus contingency. What it lacks is any kind of blue water capacity, naval aviation, but I already mentioned that when we were talking about the Air Force, and power projection beyond Turkey's immediate surroundings. Again, this is almost perfectly modeled in the game. We have 24 corvettes, including the aforementioned Perry-class frigates, called Gabia in the game, together with Yavuz and Tepe classes, all historical, and we also have 6 corvettes and 10 submarines. All ships are of foreign origin though, and quite old, I would say, compared to what we can build now. So it will be one of our priorities to build up our shipbuilding capacity and design our own local ship classes that we can build, including cruisers and, if all goes well, even an aircraft carrier or two down the line. Overall, if I should summarize it, the army is in a good spot, but will require a lot of work to make it into a modern fighting force that we can use in any way we will need. Our Western alignment at the start of the game and NATO membership will make modernization easier, but depending on which way we will go, we might eventually lose this benefit. I don't think there's much more point in highlighting the societal role of the military again. So let's just repeat that since 1960, the military has intervened directly in politics 4 times, most recently in 1997, when it forced an Islamist-led government to resign without firing a single shot. The National Security Council, which includes top generals, wields enormous influence over international policy, education, and media, and is poised to coup us if we are not careful. We will look at the exact mechanics in the later part of this video, which will start almost now. But for now, we just need to know that they will guard secularism, national unity, and NATO alignment in any way they can. So, this concludes the history part of the video. I hope you find this informative and enjoyable. It's always a bit of a balancing act between giving you enough and not going too deep. But if you are interested in more or have any questions, please feel free to post a comment and I will make sure to answer you. Now, let us go into the actual game and see the reality that Millennium Dawn and Turkey Plus has prepared for us. Alright, now let's see what the game has in store for us. So, we're gonna go with single player, new game, and we're gonna start with 1st of January 2000. Millennium Dawn. The world has changed, globally speaking. An atmosphere of peace and prosperity has ruled for about half a century. But with the recent end of the Cold War and the rise of the People's Republic of China, how will this world see itself? How will it shape itself? Will the United States continue its dominance? Will the new Russian Federation find its way into the spotlight? What roles will the former great European empires of Britain, France, and Germany play? What role will the democracies of the globe play in spreading their ideology? And what role will the shadow of terrorism have? The world has changed and will only continue to change as we enter the new millennium. So we're going to select this scenario, and out of all of these countries, we are going to choose Turkey, because that's the one that we want to play. I just wanted to mention one thing which occurred to me today when I started recording. This is probably the only mod where you have Iran, Armenia, Tajikistan, Democratic Republic of Korea, Transnistria, Israel, Brazil, and Syria as the recommended nations. It's always United States, France, Germany, Russia, and here all of these nations are, different, which I kind of like. I mean, you can still play any of the nations, but it's kind of an interesting thing. Anyway, we're going to be playing as Turkey, led by Bülent Ecevit. Ideology, Social Democrat. Background, writer, stability plus 5%. Education cost multiplier minus 5%. He's honest. So, Bülent Ecevit, as we said, is a social democrat with a Western outlook. The government is a pro-Western government. Elections, the next one, will be in October 2002. Ruling party is DSP. We have already spoken about them at length. We are a NATO member. War support plus 2%, defensive pact penalties stability modifier plus 3%, daily pro-Western support plus 0.02. Faction special rules. Only the faction leader can guarantee other countries. Countries can only be called to defensive wars. Entry and exit to and from the faction is controlled by decision events. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, is a defensive alliance composed of the US, Canada, and several European countries. Starting as a mere political alliance, NATO quickly grew into an anti-Soviet military alliance. After the breakup of the Soviet Union, NATO has taken a more increasing interventionist role in the world. However, the main purpose of the alliance is still to defend its member countries, and attacking one member state is an attack against all. Then we have Guardians of the Kemalism. Stability lowered by 5%, daily pro-Western support plus 0.02, daily Salafist support minus 0.07. The Guardians who protect Kemalism in our country have launched coups to our country in 1960s and 1980s. Along with the coups, the country's secularism principle was preserved. The Kemalist army aims to make the country follow Ataturk's ideals. When Ataturk was not a figure of the new government, the Turkish armed forces launched coups in the country to correct the bad situation. And when things improved, as the people expected, the army would leave the administration and elections would be held again. Almost every 20 years, a coup or a memorandum was sent to the government by the military, and it demoralizing the public. What? Almost every 20 years, a coup or memorandum was sent to the government by the military, and it demoralizing the public. People no longer like the armed Kemalist military order. In this case, it affected the economy of our people. Okay, there's a typo here, but I think I get what they mean. The Turkish armed forces detained parties like reactionaries that did not adapt secularism, and they will oppose these parties. The parties he opposed were eventually shut down by the Constitutional Court. Oh boy, I guess we're gonna have some typos here and there. It is time for this order to change. The people must have self-rule, and we must get rid of this military guardianship regime quickly. But first, we must be patient. Everything has a time. And last one, Yeni Türk Lirası, the new Turkish lira. Daily political power cost lowered by 0.1, stability lowered by 10%, interest rate increased by 1, resource exports revenue multiplier lowered by 10%, additional expenses of $25 million. The Turkish lira is one of the important elements for the people of Turkey. If the Turkish lira loses its value, the country destabilizes. If its value rises, the stability of the country will increase. And then we have these things to look forward to. Turkish drones recover Istanbul from the 1999 earthquake and 2001 economic crisis. And a brief history of Turkey. Since the collapse of the Ottoman Empire at the end of World War I, Turkey has largely remained in the backdrop of geopolitical affairs. Now Turkey's position puts it in the spotlight once again, as competing ideologies work to shift the country one way or the other. Should the Republic continue with Atatürk's reforms and seek recognition of the EU, or remain true to its Islamic heritage? The failing health of the Prime Minister Bülent Ecevit signals uncertain times ahead. Alright, so we're gonna go to the map to see what we have discussed before. We are surrounded by Syria, Iraq, Iran, and, a couple of other countries that are not that dramatically opposed to us. And here we have the Northern Cyprus and Cyprus. So we're going to be playing on the elite difficulty. We are going to turn off the historical AI focuses though, because I would like to have a little bit of a chaos in the world. And custom game rules, are there any? I don't think we want to strengthen anyone. That didn't really work well for us last time. Options, God of War, Arresting Political Power, Depth Wars. What is this one? The setup will make AI more likely to require Depth Wars if you default. Enable chaotic peace deals, parallel peace conference, allow conditional peace deals. Optimization, nope. AI division limiter. Potato edition. No. Okay, let's not enable limited AI focus tree options. No, the rise of Sifia. Oh, these are the fantasy ones. Don't have Chechens. Prepare for war. Flags and formable nations. No, we don't want to disable them. Multiple of the same formable nations. Allow edgy flags. I mean, sure, we can have them on. Organization options, disable the EU, no. Voting cooldown 180 days, disable data, no. Influence gain, we're gonna keep this one as a normal one, and miscellaneous rule. Railroaded World War, no. Millennium Dawn Ledger. Covered puppets, historical 9/11 trigger, no. player energy difficulty, AI energy difficulty, enable. This is all very good. Foreign policy, models limited. Release nations free, event fees limited, volunteers, that's all okay. Revoke guarantees, kicking, gameplay rules, paratroopers, maximum for normal. And then there's default behavior for all of our nations. Okay, Brazil, historical, randomized outlooks, no. Alright, so that's that. And I guess we can start. What was this one? Can get humans. Alright. Welcome to the game, everyone. Welcome to Millennium Dawn plus Turkey. So, first of all, there is additional settings in the mod here. And yeah, I think that we actually have to turn all of these on, though I'm not. This is one thing that I'm actually really not sure about. If you see the tick in white, this indicates that it is opened. If you can see the cross in white, this indicates that it's closed. Yeah, I think that we want to have it. It's a little bit weird how it's set up, but I think we want all of these extra sounds, fictional reality, word calculations, superscripted events, status of the Bitcoin, and greens. Yeah, I mean, it's, I guess by default it's all closed, so we're gonna put all of it on. So let's return to the menu and let's go. So, Turkey. We're already in by, I guess, an hour and we still haven't even looked at the game. So, that's great, as usual. Anyway, Millennium Dawn has a ton of modifiers. We've always known that. So let's actually start by the political situation, and we're gonna move then to the focuses and look through all of the things that we can do, then end up with the armies. I think that's, you know, that's how I usually do it. So let's do it the same way this time. All right. So here is our leader, Bülent Ecevit. He's a social democrat. As you can see, we have a coalition of DSP, ANAP, and MHP, who are the, I guess, second. Oh, actually, no. We have the FP, which is reactionaries, with a very high popularity, but they're not part of the coalition. DSP, MHP, and ANAP. I'm just gonna call them ANAP from now on because it's really hard to pronounce. Otherwise, I know that's probably not the right pronunciation, but I'll just use that. Those are the three most popular parties, with the exception of the reactionaries. And we have a couple more here that got some power. Genç Party is an autocracy. HDP, People Democratic Party. It's a Kurdish party. And CHP, which is the Republican People's Party. Alright, so national spirits. You can see that our stability is only 30, war support is 27. Really not good numbers. Oh, actually, before we go into the modifiers, let's just also look at the economy, which is a completely new thing in the Millennium Dawn. But if you saw my previous Let's Plays, this shouldn't really be anything new. So we have 39 civilian factories, 21 military factories, 2 commercial agriculture districts, 14 office sectors, and 6 naval yards. Our current population tax rate is 40 and corporate is 35, which is relatively high, to be honest. We usually had taxes around 15 to 25%. No wonder it's killing our stability so much. It's probably the biggest, it's the highest detriment to our stability of all. The expenses, when we look at that, we have a total expenses of $12.5 billion, I would say, and income is on at 10.39 billion. All right, so we're in a deep deficit of 2.11 billion. And it's not actually. Am I getting the? Yes, it is billions. All right. I'm never really sure about the units. So what are we paying for? Welfare is very expensive, almost $4.5 billion. Defense and internal security is each at 1.75. Health is 2.23. Migration control, bureaucracy. Interesting. Incomes, population income is almost 4.85. Corporate is 5.37. And I'm not getting much from anything else. Unemployment rate is 26.6%. Yeah, we need more factories really quickly. Average worker fulfillment, migration rate. Alright, so first things first, our debt currently is 364 billion, and because of this deficit, it's gonna start rapidly increasing, which is in line with what Turkey was like in real world. Current interest rate is not that high, it's 2.09%. Not bad, but the debt servicing is already 0.14 billion, and it's gonna rapidly increase. So not great. Idea impact interest rate is -1%. All right, well, good to know that the economy is as screwed as we thought it would be. Alright, what's our modifiers? We have liberal society, lowest political power gain, trade deal, opinion factor, workforce size, pro-Western and non-aligned support. We are a NATO member, we've already talked about that. Kurdish trouble, non-core manpower lowered by 7.5%, recruitable population lowered by 10%, war support by 20%, and resistance growth speed 15%. PKK insurgency, ceasefire, stability lowered by 5%. The PKK is a leftist Kurdish insurgency group that has fought for greater Kurdish autonomy since the 70s. Both sides have engaged in terror tactics trying to achieve victory over each other. Currently, the PKK has declared a unilateral ceasefire. Peace process and negotiations can only continue with an active ceasefire. A ceasefire allows us to gather our strength and prepare a surprise attack against the PKK. Alright, we can get rid of the PKK by reducing its strength to 15 and its aggressiveness to 45 or less. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. Support of the PKK in the outside world. Daily political power cost increased by 0.5 and stability further lowered. For a multi-ethnic state, which will stability by 5%, unity in diversity. However, more often than not, large minority groups tend to gravitate towards seeking greater autonomy or outright independence. Guardians of the Kemalism, we have read that. Turkish General Staff increases our political power cost by 0.05, but we get a little bit of organization and recovery rate. The General Staff is the highest ranking organization established to command the armed forces. The General Staff consists of a group of officers who assist the commanders of the division and higher military units in creating and disseminating policies in the army, transferring orders and overseeing work. It is normally organized along functional lines with management, intelligence, operations, training, logistics, and other branches. Leader of the General Staff is Hüseyin Kivrikolu. Okay. New Turkey. President Süleyman Demirel, popular figurehead. Political power cost is lowered by 0.05 and increases our stability. And a man at peace with the system. We get democratic acceptance increased, a democratic drift and construction speed increase. Alright. The legacy of Atatürk, political power gain is increased by 0.05 and stability increased by 5%. We have prolonged the status quo of old by maintaining an authoritarian regime that promotes Kemalist ideals. We have not shattered Mustafa Kemal Atatürk's aspirations for the Turkish state, but we have also done little to further these goals. It will be up to future generations to use the foundations we laid down so that they may usurp the mantle of Kemalism. Sectarian vows. This one is really bad. Stability and war support lowered by 15%, and non-aligned support increased by 0.03 daily. Turkey is beset by internal divisions that are drawn across ideological, religious, and ethnic lines. The Kemalists, such as CHP, hope to continue with secularized state, but there is a large percentage of the population who support moderate Islamists opposed to the very concept of secularism. In the east, the HDP has caused a great deal of trouble for the Turkish government. To mend the internal division of the country, we will either need to approach these issues with a gentle hand or an iron fist. I like that all of these kinda show that there is gonna be development, definitely with the currency, with the legacy of Ataturk, and also the sectarian vows. Hopefully it's gonna get better. Turkish historical confidence. Most of the Turks are proud of their history and ancestry, therefore the sense of nationalism is widespread and dominant in Turkey. Accountable population factor is increased by 5%, get extra war support, and division attack and defense on core territory. Emerging support is lowered by 0.05. Alright. Treaty of Montreal confirmed. Daily political power cost 0.1, but stability plus 3%, and we get a little bit of an income. The Montreal Convention regarding the regime of the Straits is a 1936 agreement that gives Turkey control over the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits and regulates the transit of naval warships. The convention guarantees the free passage of civilian vessels in peacetime and restricts the passage of naval ships not belonging to Black Sea states. The terms of the convention have been a source of controversy over the years, most notably about the Soviet Union's military access to the Mediterranean Sea. Signed on 20th of July 1946 at the Montreal Palace in Switzerland, the convention permitted Turkey to remilitarize the Straits. It went into effect on 9th of November 1946 and was registered in the League of Nations Treaty series on 11th of December 1946 and remains in force. I wonder if we can get rid of it. Turkish mafias. Oh yes. Daily political power cost 0.05, stability lowered by 5%, equipment capture ratio modifier minus 45%, and tax revenue lowered by 10%. There are a certain number of mafia groups in Turkey, and these mafias have had a lot of influence on Turkish politics. Jesus, 10%? If it lowers our income by 10%, yeah, we're actually losing a boatload of money with that. Turkish media, political power cost lowered by 0.05, stability increased by 5%. Neutral position, media's opinion on politics, on opposition and left. Okay, so we can probably shift the media's support. The Turkish media has the power to influence daily politics. The last time the media can critically demonstrate its power is on the street. This is why the media is a dangerous force, so we need to silence it by intervening in the media, no matter what is necessary. That's a fun thing. Parliament limitations. Daily political power cost lowered by 0.1, stability increased by 10%, war support lowered by 10%. War goal tension limit was 100%, volunteer tension limit and justify war goal. The parliament can prevent us from entering into any war by following its thoughts. To overcome this obstacle of the parliament, we can convince the parliament to war and break the status quo situation, or we can disable the parliament with an authoritarian regime forever. Turkish housing. Monthly population increased by 25%, lowered tax cost factor by 4%, stability minus 5%, extra construction speed, electrical power, and steel consumption lowered. Status of the build, not resistant. Housing, or more generally, living spaces refer to the construction and assigned usage of houses or buildings, individually or collectively, for the purpose of shelter. Housing ensures that members of society have a place to live, whether it is a home or some other kind of dwelling, lodging or shelter. Many governments have one or more housing authorities, sometimes also called a housing ministry or housing department. Oh yes, I forgot about this. We're gonna read more about this because Turkey has a huge problem with earthquakes. It always had, and it also had a huge issue with illegal or downright illegal constructions or constructions that were not up to code. So we'll probably have to deal with that. Turkish tourism. Tax cost factor 5%, extra stability, but lowered construction speed and free repair. All sources of power use multiplier plus 5% and tax revenue lowered. The unique cultural heritage, stunning landscapes and historical sites of Turkey have long attracted visitors from around the world. By investing in infrastructure, hospitality, and international promotion, Turkey has boosted its tourism sector, providing a significant source of income and strengthening its global ties. This flourishing industry not only enhances our economy, but also fosters cultural exchange and national pride. Okay, we can manage tourism. Turkey's new millennium. Political power cost is lowered by 1. Pro-Western support, acceptance of pro-Western diplomacy, non-aligned support, and national support is lowered. Turkey's new millennium suggests a period of transformation and change for Turkey as the country moves into a new era, starting from the year 2000 and beyond. This phrase could be used to describe the social, political, economic, and cultural developments taking place in Turkey in the new millennium, reflecting the nation's aspirations and goals to the future. Turkish monetary reformation in action. In the early 2000s, Turkey underwent a significant monetary reformation to address the economic challenges it was facing at the time. The country was grappling with high inflation, fiscal instability, and a history of financial crises. The government and central bank introduced a series of reforms. I guess this is pertaining to the IMF intervention, because the real crisis is about to start next year. The government and central bank introduced a series of reforms aimed at stabilizing the economy, curbing inflation, and improving overall financial health. Will be removed 19th of June 2002. So tax cost goes up, but interest rate is lowered by 2. Resource exports revenue multipliers increased by 10%. Productivity growth is 0.05. Civilian industry required workforce 25% down, and additional income 0.1. We're a regional power. As a regional power, we wield an outsized influence. I guess it's an outsized influence on regional affairs and maintain the ability to protect our sovereignty and vital interests of home against the interference from larger powers. Power status is determined by how much GDP we contribute to the world total, modified by our independence from foreign influence. Our current contribution is 1.6%. Oh, this is a really nice tool. We're gonna track that. The required contribution for the different levels are: superpower is 15%, great power is 6.5%, major power 2.5%, 0.2 is a minor power, and 0.2 is a non-power. We are a regional power. Okay, so that one is somewhere between minor and major. In every geographical region, a certain number of the strongest minor powers will be classified as regional powers. Okay, if there aren't enough superpowers, great powers, and major powers in the region. The regions and numbers of countries above minor powers are 7 Europe, 3 Middle East and North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa 3, Asia 7, and America. Okay, so we are a minor power, but we are a regional power because there's not enough. And if we get to above 2.5%, we're going to become a major power. Currently, we're gaining 0.2 daily political power gain, and 20% bonus. We have a tension limit increased by 15%. I get a 20% bonus against foreign influence and foreign defense. Auto influence target cap is 1. Outside of home continent, foreign influence minus 15%. Migration rate plus 5%. Interest rate is lowered by 0.5. Loss cost 20%. And internal investment SWOT plus 1. Naval power of the continent. Foreign influence in home continent 5% and naval cost lowered by 5%. We possess the largest naval power on our continent, and we currently represent the largest naval power on our continent. Someone can overtake us, assuming their deployed naval manpower is larger than ours. Okay, so this is about deployed naval manpower. We have about 8,000 men in the Navy. I guess the only people who could contest us would be, well, I'm not entirely sure what, because we definitely have a smaller navy than China or Japan. So are we counted in Africa or in Europe? I'm confused. I'm really confused about that one. National electric grid, fuel gain or by 1250, lack of fuel penalties. And we have a global navigation satellite system, communication system, and reconnaissance satellite system. All right, so a ton of modifiers. Now, when we look at our situation, we are a Sunni. We have stagnation. All right, so this one can improve on its own. Hopefully it will. It would give us a pretty decent bonus if we increase it. Yeah. They changed it in a way that it doesn't really help with direct income, but it helps with productivity and stability, which goes back to the economy, though I do not remember. Productivity is here, 689. Alright, we're getting 0.8. Factory, dockyard, and construction and wow. Okay, everything is down by 31%. Apart from construction speed of commercialized agricultural districts, that's 62% extra. It's benchmarked against global average productivity, which is 650. So we're slightly above the global average, but only very slightly. And the higher we get this number, the more we're gonna gain from everything. So it is in our best interest to increase the productivity as much as we can. Now, if we get to stable growth, we would get 1 extra bonus, which would pretty much more than double our productivity gain. And the higher we get, the better we will be. Fast growth, economic boom actually gives you 3. That would be amazing. I remember how in Singapore we were at ridiculous numbers like 3,000. Fortunately, we have a systematic corruption, which is something that is really hurting us. We have lower research speed, factory output, ideology-driven defense, counterintelligence, foreign influence, tax revenue down by 15%. That's crazy. So we need to kill corruption. If we could get it to negligible or slight, we would gain a huge amount of money. And we also need to fight the mafias. So that's 25% extra income. That would be more than enough to pay for everything that we have. I'm not gonna address the debt at this point until it gets to something like 1 billion. So we can get to roughly, I would say, about $1 to $2 trillion in debt without any risk. So we can let it run for a little bit, but we'll have to keep an eye on it. Corruption, bad. I mean, you know, that goes without saying. Industrial. Oh, and these are the 3. What do they call it? Internal factions. Yes. So we have industrial conglomerates. Expected administrative spending is increased, but they actually lower the amount of foreign, or the duration of the foreign investment. That's actually pretty good. And they... Wait, they don't like us? What's their opinion? Oh, only 30. Right, they really do not like us. And they're gonna take by 0.5 monthly. So in about... would that be 40 months, it's gonna remove the penalties. Resource gain, infrastructure speed, and tax revenue from civilian industry. But okay, that means they can eventually earn us more money and help us with infrastructure build. Not bad. Islamic congregations. They help with stability, for population, and political power gain, but education cost as well. These ones are not good. It would be great if we could switch it to something else. But as you can see, it costs 1800 political power. So you can theoretically could do it, but you are crazy when you invest into that. Sometimes the game allows it by default or by event. So going to small and medium business owners, for example, would be amazing. And Turkish armed forces, which actually like us a little bit, which means they give us a bonus to organization, recovery rate, lose military wage. Not great. Not great, because they help with the nationalist support. So the only one that I actually like out of these is the industrial conglomerates. I would like to get rid of you and you. A military industrial complex would be way better. And a fossil fuel industry, for example, but we have what we have. Alright, well, we'll have to deal with them. Government expenditures. We have basic civil service administration. This one is usually a good idea to increase because it gives you way more political power gain, and it's not that expensive. Though I believe it, it cost spirals quite exponentially. But it is a really good thing when you get, for example, 0.5 every day is a huge boost. And it would increase by 0.6 billion daily. So that really is a fair exchange. If only because you can use the 0.5 daily, for example, to boost your economy. In 600 days, we could go to stable growth, which is good. You have medium military spending. Alright. I'm kind of surprised. I would expect there would be more here. But I cannot complain. This is actually fairly fair. Military opinion. So we might want to increase it down the line because we really need to modernize our military. Extensive police and intelligence apparatus. Alright. Basic support for primary and secondary education. This one is actually also good to increase. It's not such a big difference. Yeah, to get to higher education focus, it give us a massive bonus to research speed, 10%. And productivity growth goes up by 0.08, but we would pay $1 billion extra every day. Well, alright. Health budget. This one increases population growth and stability. So, and tax cost is lowered. But it can consume, an inordinate amount of money. Already paying 2.23 billion, and we would go to something like 5.57 billion. So, pipe dream for now, but we'll aim for it. And social spending, that one is definitely just for stability and political power gain. Basic pensions are fair. We might have to kill them though. Oh, Jesus Christ. 4.5 billion. Extensive would be 10.67. And if we just went by one step down, we would save about 1.8 billion. Alright. Policies with mixed economy. 50% goes to the market. We have mandatory service. Alright. I would kind of like it to switch it to volunteer service only, which would butcher our recruitable population. It would drop it to half, which is kind of crazy. But, we're in a world today where effectiveness is more important than numbers. But we shall see. Volunteer service for women. Alright, I'm fine with that. Regional interventionism. I would really like to improve this one to global interventionism because it helps with sending units wherever we want to, and a lot of our stuff that we will be doing will be dependent on being able to send out volunteers. Official international education, that is amazing. We have the best possible one, that's due to NATO. And the last one is regulated migration. I think we might go to heavily regulated migration eventually, especially if Syria is going to collapse down the line. Alright, and we have a lot of companies, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So, for military industrial, we got FNSS and Otokar and MKEK and Roketsan. Alright. We have two naval ones, Gojuk Naval Shipyard and Gojuk Naval Shipyard for submarines. These ones are all round, and this is a rocket system one. Alright, Turkish Aerospace Industries, and this is the default air manufacturer. Okay, and industry. Airfreeze all around. Wait, the same guys. Oh yeah, it's the same guys. And when it comes to nuclear power, we do not have any. That's interesting. I think that switching to defensive or offensive eventually could trigger an attack from China and United States, because they try to enforce nuclear proliferation and nuclear weapon stance. No use case. Complete first use. Alright, well, that goes through our basic screen. Now, when we look at the focuses, that one is going to be fairly simple and quick. So, what do we have here? Well, it is kind of fun. We have the legacy of the Turkish Republic, and then we go down through the political one all the way to the 2001 economic crisis. That's what I was talking about in the intro. And that one triggers a new election, which then, based on your winning party, triggers one of these options. We have the visionaries of the left. That means we would get it changes your tree, by the way. This one goes if you default on the AKP and Erdogan, who comes here into power. Remember, he is banned till 2003, I think. Well, there's no time restriction here, but you get first Abdullah Gül and then Erdogan. Or we default on, if we don't default on the AKP, you can choose any of these other options, which will kill the tree at this point and give you a different one, which is set for that party. So the option here, visionaries of the left, which would require IP, UDP, or MAP to be in the ruling party. Kemalists will become an ally, traditionalists will become hostile, or CHP coming spring. So CHP focus tree, Kemalists become allies, traditionalists become hostile. The government is not done yet. Changes. Okay, so it's DSP focus tree. So that is if we could keep them in power, the current alliance. And restarts coalition talks of MHP and NAP. Alright. Innovationism spark. Change the national focus to state of HP. Okay, I have no idea how this one is triggered. HP's promises of efficiency. It's a party that we do not have currently. That's why it's not listed here. I'm not sure. HP. I guess that's technocrats. Military plot. National Unity Committee overthrows the government. Moderate Islamists would like to take over the country if the army withdraws from politics, unless the National Unity Committee doesn't withdraw. Liberal Democratic Party, so that's LDP. Bees on the action. That's NAP. Alright, the Motherland Party. Rise to Populist Young Movement. Genç Party. I thought that the Genç Party was... Oh, it's an autocracy, non-democratic authoritarian. Okay. Kemalists are allied. Traditionalists are hostile. Erbakan, that's FP. So that's reactionaries, and Milliyetçi Hareket Partisi, which is the MHP. So based on who gets the elections, we are gonna switch through here. There has been a lot of votes and a lot of discussion. I'm still not sure at this point who we're gonna go with. I guess I'm gonna let the game steer me a little bit. I'm leaning towards CHP because it's the Republicans, and I played pretty much everything other than Western Outlook in the game, and I think they might have some really interesting choices eventually. They're like, you know, they're not hardline nationalists, but they're a nationalistic Republican Atatürk's party. But we'll see. You know, I'll let the game steer me a little bit. So apart from the political tree, we also have the Turkish National Armed Forces here, which helps us reform the military. We can get the modernization, war tactics, and the Turkish Special Armed Forces, which, you know, it leads all the way to Turkish career, doctrines of war, and serving Turkey. And on the other side, we have Evict the Industrial Facilities, which is an industrial chain, which is one that we will probably focus on pretty heavily right off the bat. Here we have something that's called 2023 mission and peace, whatever it costs. I'm not sure who, the one thing that I kind of hate on this mod is that it has almost no descriptions in many of these. So I'll have to look what the 2023 mission is, but I guess this is about NATO. So we'll see. It's probably gonna come from an event because it requires just a date. Then there's the COVID tree over here, and we have down here. Oh wait, here we have the Cyprus one. Friend or foe. There is a lot of ways you can approach it. There's the aggressive approach, the path of compromise, or the path of no return. Depending on that, you can get basically path of compromise is a reunification based on the independent Cyprus. The path of no return leads to independence or war with Greece, and aggressive approach is basically a proxy war between northern Cyprus and Cyprus. So we'll have to choose on that one as well. And here we have the 2023 elections, which is, something that is far, far in the future. And here are the European Union or European United Europe focus trees, because we can join the EU if we want to. And here is a Turkish Union, which I kind of have. I guess that's if we create some kind of our own faction. Turkish TV. Turkish Union needs to be signed. A reform. The establishment of the Turkish Union in reform package will be presented. Not sure where this one comes from. Alright, I think those are all that we have available. Yes, so we'll have a lot to go through in the focus trees. What I actually plan to do in the focus trees is we are gonna start by gaining the legacy of the Turkish Republic. We're gonna get the friend of foe, and we are going to get... Wait, there was one more. I think there was one more, but I might have seen just the two. Nope, okay. So it's just those two. Yeah, because this is gonna give us 150 political power and 5 stability, and you give us additional 125. And then it will probably go through the industry, combining it with these ones. Actually, I might go through this, because that gives additional 5 stability, and then we can use this one to kill corruption or lower it from 6 to 5. And then it starts getting... we get more political power here as well. And even more, and some money. No, we lose some money. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. The industry, we might just combine it. We might just get these two focuses for the political power, then to move down this chain. Maybe we could go all the way before the crisis and stop it somewhere here, like with the winds, and then finish the tree and see. Maybe. These ones we definitely need to, but I have a feeling that it's gonna just change the follow-up tree. It's not gonna change all of these, so we can finalize them later. All right, well, that's that. Now, let's look at the events and decisions, which are also crazy long. Man, I wonder how long this episode is gonna be, because it's already closing on 2 hours. So, we have one, I mean, these are, I'm gonna call them sections. So we have a section about joining the EU, which would require us to be a candidate member and finish all of our requirements. Then there's the Grand National Assembly, which is the Turkish Parliament, and here we can see how many seats each of the faction or each of the parties have, and I think here is all of the parties that we can actually have. So you can see we have the FP, the SP, DYP, CHP and MHP in the parliament. There's also ANAP and 27 independents and 2 empty seats, so 550, and this is probably going to change every elections. We have a couple of options here. We can go with war preparation, shutting down the parliament, or war act. So this will come into play only if we are at war, pretty much. Then Guardians of the Kemalism, our army, which considers itself the protector of Kemalism in our country, organized and carried out coups in 1960 and 1980 due to damage to the Kemal structure in the past. Our military generally does not like conservative parties and supports secularist parties. If we want to prevent our army from carrying out a coup, we must please our army. If we want to directly prevent our army from carrying out a coup, we have to wait a little longer. So our armies fought about parties. So they hate the moderate Islamists. They support the CHP quite significantly. They hate HADEP and MHP for some reason, and IP. They like DSP Greens. They don't like ANAP. They like Genç Party. Why is ANAP here twice? Alright. House of Osman they hate quite a lot. So CHP is currently the favorite of the Turkish armed forces. And there's a number of options here that we can choose. They do not really cost anything outright, but they cost political power, as we're gonna go, and some additional things. And it changes the opinions, alright, and it gives some bonuses like the stability, division recovery rate, and so on. Alright, then we have internal factions interaction. Turkey has a few factions in the country. They are powerful factions that can incredibly tax our country. However, it is also possible that the more we mess with these groups, it could cause us issues down the line. So we can allow foreign nationals into the military, encourage religion in the government, impose taxes on religious institutions, and cut taxes on industries. Alright. So these are dealing with our current factions, or the, what are they called? I always forget that. Internal factions. Alright, so these are ways how we can increase or decrease their opinions. Alright, the Turkish Mafia, this one is a big one. The Turkish Mafia has been active for quite some time, committing crimes such as drug dealings, murders, frauds, you name it. In recent years, however, they have begun becoming more and more political, and certain parties have been caught making deals with them and slowly giving them more legitimacy. The mafia will also cause us to lose money, and lots of it too, as the higher influence allows more people to be able to commit fraud and tax-related crimes. Additionally, mafia influence will increase every 2 weeks by 1 if their influence reaches 60. This can happen if we neglect certain events, or if we make poor choices when it comes to dealing with the mafia. We can combat mafia influence by raiding their safe houses, increasing our police spending, or even maintaining party popularity so that our people aren't affected by their campaigns. Additionally, if we get mafia influence below 35, we will be able to make arrests of wanted mafia criminals, eventually allowing us to completely eradicate the mafia in below 5. So they get 45 right now. We can fund them, or we can declare war on them. Okay, if we declare war on them, we get massive penalties. But I guess that we will probably be able to lower them faster. We'll have to see how it's gonna go. Currently they're 45, so we have to make sure they're gonna be lowering their influence and not increasing it. The Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court of Turkey, sometimes abbreviated as AYM, is the highest legal body for constitutional review in Turkey. It examines the constitutionality in respect of both form and substance of laws, decrees having the force of law, and the rules of procedures of the Turkish Grand National Assembly. Unity rate of the AYM members, 95. The politicization is 5. Soft group, precision group. The unity rate of the AYM indicates the AYM's regeneration ability. If regeneration ability is high, they tend to reject radical choices. Okay. And if they go and become politicized, the military can challenge them. So abandon European courts, shut them down, change one new lawmaker. Okay, that's a depoliticization, raise new political question. Politicize them, investigate the government, investigate the opposition, overturn elections. Oof, okay. Very expensive, but we'll see how this is useful. Turkish media faults, general media resolution. Okay, this one is not bad. We might want to choose this one. Adds Turkish media. Alright. The mass media in Turkey includes a wide variety of domestic and foreign periodicals expressing disparate views, and domestic newspapers, which are extremely competitive. However, media ownership is concentrated in the hands of a few large private media groups, which are typically part of wider conglomerates controlled by wealthy individuals. General media resolution. So we currently have, don't we have Turkish media already? We do, but they are fairly weak, and this one would give us, okay, so this is one of the ones that we will want to get, because it is it's basically very good on all regards, so we have to think about these. Let me just remove these ones. Well, actually, let's not do that. We'll see. We'll deal with these options, but this one is a really good one. We need to get that one. Turkish political decisions, political laws, elections, threshold. This one is actually a big problem for Turkey. The threshold of 10% is extremely high. It's almost too restrictive, to be quite honest. So 10%, I wonder if there's a way how to lower it. Discourage population growth. Campaign for lower government spending. Okay. Indoctrination campaigns. Propaganda campaigns. Hold new extraordinary elections and retire. I wonder if we can lower the threshold, because in my country, Czech Republic, it is 5%, which is still considered very high. There are countries I think I've read that the Netherlands have like 1% or something, which is extremely low, but I think that around 5% it is fine, because otherwise what happens is that if you have an election where you have a lot of parties, and we do have a lot of parties, you can actually see it here. Yeah, here. All of the ones that do not get into the parliament forfeit their votes for the bigger parties, so it is very unpredictable and really not representative. That's, by the way, how the coalition that we have right now was formed, because the people couldn't vote in other parties and they grabbed a huge amount of votes just by default. Turkish labor unions. Labor unions in Turkey gained legality with the removal of the phrase "no society based on the class basis" in 1938. Today, labor unions and employer unions are constantly in conflict with each other. We need to keep these unions in agreement with each other, otherwise bad things will happen to us. These bad things go as far as punishing people to strike. Or pushing people to strike. As long as we made them happy, nothing bad will happen to us. So we have DISK, Turkish, and more. And Employers Union Forces Collective DISK. They do not pose much problem. Main reason of the strike: bad relations, low stability, economy in depression, or we're in war. Orange of unions. Relations is 96. Their stance is in favor, and power range is free. Alright, so these are acknowledged unions. An emergency panel. Political agreement with unions. It embraces relations with them. Open new industrial funds. This one is downright good. There is no downside to this one apart from the cost. It increases the relations with them. Provision of the industrial workspace. Work of the hammer, construction speed, and unfortunately they support emerging. I kind of don't like that. We'll have to be careful about that. Leash new industries, lowers relations, but gives us one of that civilian industry. Alright. Encourage cheap industries and profit maximization. Okay. Turkish 2000 report on foreign influence. Alright, we have United States, Pakistan, and Russia influencing us. Then Germany, Iran, and United Kingdom. Pakistan, really? It's kind of weird. Nothing to... We'll have to keep an eye on it. Secret plans of the Islamist restorationists. The radical Islamist groups in our country have secret plans to attract power to themselves, but they don't have the strength to implement these plans. If we help them, we can cause a great change in Turkish history, and thanks to us, the Ottoman Empire or the Great Islamic Caliphate would bear. Allies: IBDAC and House of Osman. Potential allies: FP. Main enemies: JHP, National Unity Committee. Potential enemies: DSP, IP, and the Genç Party. Crackdown on the Islamists. This channel will be closed forever. Strengthen the Great Ottoman values. Print pro-Islamist propaganda. Replanning initiative. That's interesting. Authorize the Great Plan. So closing this seems smart, but once we get the economic sickness, this would actually give us political power and stability. We'll keep it. Osman Pamukov's opinion. Osman Pamukov is the commander currently serving the Turkish armed forces. The events taking place in Turkish politics may cause this commander to enter into political affairs. That's why the commander's thoughts on politics are very important. If his opinion of Turkish politics increases around to 50% negative points, he would likely join the politics instead of being a commander. if he stays around 25 negative points, he would like to stay as a commander. Currently, his negative opinion is 25. Release guilty Kurds. It's gonna make him mad. Accept the Western political demands. That makes him mad. New pardon for general peace. That makes him mad. Okay, the only one that makes sense here is pressure him to stay in the army. Alright. Turkish local elections. System reshuffle 1824 days. The municipal elections in Turkey are significant as they determine the local governance and administration of cities, towns, and districts. The candidates usually represent different political parties, and the election campaigns focus on local issues, infrastructure development, public services, and community welfare. What we will achieve if we take over the municipalities of the cities in the country? Local construction speed increased. Okay. And municipal elections can develop without depending on regular elections, so it is possible that local elections can continue if we ban the elections. Alright. I'm getting 100 political power every, it's probably like 5 years. DSI, State Hydraulic Works. The State Hydraulic Works, Turkish Devlet Su İşleri, is a state agency under the Ministry of Environmental and Forestry of Turkey, responsible for the utilization of all country's water resources. The institution's four major functions are energy, agriculture, services, and environment. The State Hydraulic Works, Turkish Devlet Su İşleri, is a state agency under the Ministry of Environment and Forest of Turkey, responsible. Oh, it's the same thing. Okay, it's doubled. Kargi Dam and Yamula Dam. Oh, okay, so we can build dams for a little bit of tax cost. Here's the Turkish tourism industry. Turkey boasts a rich tapestry of cultural heritage. Yes, we read that. These decisions aim to balance the benefits of tourism growth with the need to address its challenges. By implementing measures such as regulating visitor numbers, promoting eco-friendly practices, investing in infrastructure, and involving local communities in decision-making, Turkey can foster a tourism industry that supports both economic growth and cultural integrity. It's shaped by factors as democracy, war, government style, and stability. The quality and quantity of tourists change depending on the circumstances, and this requires a balance. 46%, 46, so good quality and good quantity. Open touristic places in Izmir. Gives extra industries, construction space, supplies. You lose a bit of money. Okay. The Roman Antioch. Invest in Cappadocia. Tourism in Istanbul. I like that it increases the industries, but it's a little bit expensive. Bolster the quality. Bolster the quantity. So they are basically in direct opposition. System adjustment. Okay, effects of peace. Effects of democratic outlook. Effects of stable state. Alright, so it's gonna probably give us boosts every 2 or 3 months. Turkish housing earthquake credibility. Turkey has had many earthquakes. This list includes any notable historical earthquakes that have epicenters within the current boundaries of Turkey, or which caused significant effects in this area. Overall, the population in major cities like Istanbul resides in structures that are a mix of vulnerable and earthquake-resistant construction. Tectonic setting. Turkey is a seismically active area within the complex zone of collision between the Eurasian plate and both the African and Arabian plates. Much of the country lies on the Anatolian plate, a small plate bounded by two major strike subfault zones, the North Anatolian Fault and the East Anatolian Fault. The western part of the country is also affected by the zone of extensional tectonics in the Aegean Sea caused by the southward migration of the Hellenic arc. Not great. Seismic hazard. Seismic hazard in Turkey is highest along the plate boundaries, but these but there is a significant risk of damaging earthquakes almost anywhere in the country. Seismic maps that show the risk have changed through time. Earthquakes in Turkey affect housing projects. We will use cheap goods by keeping the buildings in a bad way, but this housing, we won't care about the lives, or we will try to care about the lives of our people making housing projects on acceptable budget, or we will care about the lives of the people by making housing projects expensive. Poor buildings will receive maximum damage, medium, and minimum. Keep in mind that only 7 and above 7 magnitude effects have a change in effects. So we're currently resistant to earthquake 17. Resistant buildings. Alright. So this affects how the population tax, stability, steel consumption. Alright, slum law. Increases manpower, lowers stability. But we increase general housing resistance by 3 points. But it hurts the ruling government. The restoration build talks with the geologists. Okay. Gives us extra 5. Push earthquake projects. Push a new zoning amnesty. That hurts it. But it gives us stability. And the corporation build. I guess, Turkey is in a situation where it is said that Istanbul is going to be destroyed within the next, for sure, within the next couple hundred years. There is going to be such earthquake that is going to basically level the city. So I guess the game is probably going to hit us with something like that eventually. So it might be a good idea to actually increase the resistance, even if it hurts us. But significant political power needs to be spent. Islamism and secularism. Our country's society remains deeply religious. As a consequence, our government's continued popularity relies on our religious credentials. A major factor in our government's religious legitimacy is our adherence to conservative social values. So social conservatism, government and society. Pursuing social liberal policies too quickly risks increasing support for Islamist alternatives and the radicalization of society. We can reduce this risk by making sure not to decrease social conservatism government, which is affected by focuses and decisions, too far below society, which gradually rises and falls to match the former. Okay, so if we increase social conservatism, the society is gonna catch up eventually. But we cannot increase it too much or go too little because that's gonna cause issues. Crackdown on Muslim Brotherhood. Subsidize Western culture. Subsidize Salafism. Encourage female representation in government. Discourage it. Okay, limit female employment options, alcohol in hotels, reimpose dress code, unban the burqa, headscarves, recriminalize same-sex, and secularize the state. Alright, then there's NATO membership. We're not gonna leave the NATO. And here's the Kurdish conflict. So we already know that PKK has an aggressiveness and a cap. And it lowers by 0.5 per week. Their strength is currently 35, minimum strength is 30. We can start the Kurdish industrialization program, which gives us stability and helps with the Kurdish trouble. Or power of the fist. Alright, this one can be done only when we have them active. And then we just decrease their strength and aggressiveness. But replace Kurdish trouble with the endless war. Okay. Jesus Christ. Aggressiveness will decrease natural every week up to a certain cap. Aggressiveness cap can both decrease and increase based off on the development of Kurdish provinces, as well as your other country's events and decisions. If it drops to 50 or lower, the PKK will call a ceasefire. Low aggressiveness does not equate to no attacks, it just means that the PKK will conduct less attacks. Strength measures the military capability and popularity and will impact the strength of resistance in Kurdish states. The minimum value of strength is 15 per every country the PKK operates in. Strength will also affect the damage done by the attacks. Aggressiveness will result in a higher frequency of attacks. Strength will determine the damage done. These random attacks will result in an increase of PKK strength, which can cause the PKK to declare independence from us if it reaches 100. We can manually attack the PKK strength through raids, but we would risk increasing their aggressiveness. To remove the PKK, you need to have their strength below 15 and their aggressiveness below 45. Alright, we know what to do. And Kurdish-Turkish conflict military branch. So this is the civilian branch and this is the military branch. Same description. Initiate a draw operation. Decreases strength and aggressiveness, but it must be done after 2016. Conduct an operation. They need to be active. And raid PKK strongholds. Vehicle manpower lowered and stability lowered. But we will end the ceasefire. They'll be able to manually attack them. But it costs 20 military power. So I guess doing the Kurdish industrialization all around the clock is a good idea, because that probably is gonna appease them the most. And then there's the world branch. Make anti-PKK propaganda in the world. Remind world that the PKK is a communist. Make films about PKK's murder. Pressure to cause pro-PKK TV networks to European countries. Alright. Modify the support of the PKK. Pressure to close the PKK TV networks. And make America and European countries recognize the PKK as a terrorist organization, which removes it completely. So make their anti-propaganda. Okay, so we have to go through this all. So make anti-PKK, then remind world, then make films, then pressure to cause. Pressure. Alright, so this is also a priority. Sectarian vows, population of Kemalism, and population of the Islamists, and population of the Kurdish movement. Kemalism is the founding ideology. Islamism refers to a broad set of political ideas that utilize and draw inspiration from the Islamic symbols, and Kurdish nationalism is a nationalist political movement that asserts that the Kurds are a nation. Unite the people. Stabilize the sectarian vows. That's a good one. It gives us stability. This one requires United Turkey, whatever that is. The Shanghai Cooperation, Central Bank of Turkey. Connect to EU Bank. Gives us stability. But we would need to be a union member of European Union. Alright, what does it show? Dollars, euros, Bitcoin, sterling, and interest rate. Alright, not sure what that is. And Northern Cyprus. North Cyprus is a country that depends on us, therefore it is our duty to invest in and support Northern Cyprus. We can help them with the following decisions. Send money. Send scientists, send support to their industry, send support to their army, intervene in Northern Cyprus. And of course, unify. Well, okay. And that's all. This is the longest events and decisions that I've ever seen in my life. Holy hell. Alright, well, I'll take a small break, then we're gonna continue with research, which is gonna be also a crazy thing to look at. But we're in it, so we need to get through it. Alright, now that we have cleared the decisions, and boy was that a long chapter. I mean, you know, the mod brings in a lot of interesting stuff, and it's gonna take a lot of our attention to make sure that everything works well. But I'm happy to say that we can now move on to research. Research in Millennium Dawn is quite different than in other Hearts of Iron 4 mods from what I've seen, and I really like it because it's tied directly to your GDP. So our GDP right now is 1 billion, no, actually that's 1,174 billion. So with this GDP, as you can see over here, we have access to the there's two default ones. Third one is unlocked at 0, so pretty much everybody has 3 basic research slots, and then you get another one at 500 billion and $1 trillion in GDP. Once we get to $2 trillion, we're going to get an additional slot, then one more at 4, one more at 10, one more at 15, one more at 20, and the last one at $30 trillion. Now, I'm not sure if anyone has unlocked all of them. I would suspect that the United States, being the biggest economy, I don't think we'll be able to see. No, they see just their debt. Ah, no, we can see. Okay, so the biggest economy in the world is the United States, and they have $10.3 trillion. So they have all but... No, actually, they have 3 more slots than we do. How's China? At 2,000, they should be fairly low. Yeah, they're about half, 5.6 trillion. Alright, so that's interesting. I never really realized that, but everybody has something to work to. So for us now, we have 5 slots, and these ones are locked. We can get even additional ones from the development level. So even a small nation with a high development can get extra slots. So that would be additional 4 that we do not have accessible. Our development level right now is 17,935, so we are, well, quite close to the next one. So wait, that means that we can get 5, 6, 10 more research slots. That's actually really interesting. So we can have 15 at max. Oh, I mean, fair enough. Nobody's gonna have that probably in the game because, of course, you know, with rising GDP and rising population, your development level keeps faltering. So it's a question if it's even possible. You would have to have a nation with insane amount of GDP and not a high level of population. But, you know, never mind. Let's leave that to the game itself. So let's also expand laboratories. Research slots from industry size 3. Ah, okay, so you have to take this one. Okay, for 5 billion or 4.69 billion dollars, you get an extra slot. Okay, so that's it. That's, I think, new that you get these ones, but you have to spend money on them and actively get it. So we'll have to check this one out from time to time. But anyway, research. So they've added a number of categories here. We are sort of good and sort of bad when it comes to research. I'm going to start by the electronics and industrial technology. You can see that there is a ton of things here. Systems, you have high-speed rail, you have engineering, which helps with construction, you have nanofibers and 3D printers, which help with factory output and efficiency. You get genetic engineering, which helps with population. You have fuel processing and energy technologies, which help with various various aspects of your energy production. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Nuclear reactors and agricultural digitalization, which I believe is completely new. I do not recall recall this one, and I was kind of curious because the agricultural buildings, commercialized agricultural district, their revenue, I don't recall them. Raise number of required workers, commercial agriculture district, fuel gain. It increases supplies and employs people. Okay, so that's an interesting way how you can reduce unemployment, because that is, so actually it's less, but also cost less. Okay, well, I guess we'll utilize some of those. But this is going to be our priority, because when you look at the time, while we are kind of okay on some of these, we are way behind on almost all of these technologies, and they take excessive amounts of time. You get 427 days on each one of these, 569 days on construction, and some of these energy ones can take almost up to 1,000 days of research. So we have to be really careful about these ones. Same goes directly for electronics, which boost your research speed, which is of course going to be also our priority, and we're really behind on these ones. We don't even have microcomputing, which is a 1985 technology, and we should get even the improved computing and advanced computing. So we're gonna get these free as a priority as soon as possible. And we're also gonna work on GPRS, 3G, Wi-Fi, Edge, and all of these technologies, because they give educational bonuses and bonuses to research speed. Plus, there's also the neural network revival, which helps with production capacity, but I don't think we're not gonna play much with that, as our resources are gonna be fairly limited. So they're gonna boost in the beginning the construction speed, the production efficiency, and we are gonna work on research. Once that is cleared, we can start looking a little bit into our energy infrastructure, and I would like to continue with the development of nuclear reactors, because we do have that technology available. I don't know how many we have. Turns out we have none. Okay, I never really checked if, but I don't think Turkey has actual nuclear power plants. I do not recall ever hearing that, but they do. I think they do. I would guess they do. I'll have to check that. Anyway, nuclear reactors can be built. You have additional different ways how to generate energy. I need to check where they are though. Come on, where's the power plant? Here's the renewable infrastructure. Sure. Here it is. Fossil fuel power plant. So they cost 1/5 and give 1 gigawatt, and this one costs 5 times more, but it gives 2 gigawatts. But I have a really big hunch that that's gonna go, yes, it's gonna go up quite significantly, and there's bonuses here. While the regular power plants, all sources of power, this is about photovoltaics. Which one boosts regular power plants? Fuel refining? This one helps with, here it is. Fossil fuel power plant power generation plus 10. Huh. It's actually kind of interesting that these seems to be better. Kind of confusing. But I mean, you know, nuclear power plants also have a bonus that they can be used for fission material. I think you need them for fission material, though we're not really planning to build any nuclear weapons at this point. Consuming moderate enriched uranium in the process. We'll have to pay for that. Well, either way, here's the energy, which we will need to keep an eye on, and right now we're doing good, so it's not a major thing for us, but we'll need to keep an eye on it. Back to technology. So, as I said, electronics and industrial technology is going to be our priority. There's also space technology, which is kind of cool. You can build satellites, send them up into space, so you can create your own communication networks, but that is not something that we can really afford right now. And there's also the guided missile technology, which is basically the ICBMs, and of course nuclear weapons fall into this category. Again, not something we will play with in the beginning. Now, what we need to keep in mind though is our army technology. You can see that, for example, when it comes to infantry, small arms, and utility vehicles, we are doing good, but we don't have any of these support weapons, and we are significantly behind on the command and control equipment. We also do not have any camouflage, we do not have the reinforced Kevlar vest, so we are somewhere in the middle. Same thing goes for the armor, because we do not even have a tank that we could produce. That is something that I will get to in a second, but you can see that we have nothing here. Basically, we have a second and third generation tank hull. We could design one, but I think it would be a good initiative for us to actually go ahead and research the post-Cold War armored hull and design a new home-based or home-built tank, which we can then get all of these supporting technologies for. Unfortunately, we need to get a lot of them because we are significantly behind. We have a Cold War diesel engine, there's late Cold War diesel engine, but we can start small by designing a basic tank with, you know, modern battle stations, maybe Cold War ammunition, something like that, and we can enhance it as we're gonna go by building newer and newer generations. So I like that idea, and that is going to be our first priority. So I plan to dedicate 4 slots to industry and 1 slot to the battle tank design and research. Once we get to the next research slot, whenever that's gonna be, we're gonna add another one, and when we finish with the tank, we're gonna start catching up on this equipment. We can buy licenses for various technologies, so I'm not really worried, but the tank capability is something that we really need to work on, because the tanks that we have in the storage are not good enough. I think I already mentioned that these are the M60A3s, which are significantly aged by now, and we will need to replace them as soon as possible. Alright, when it comes to artillery, we are also significantly behind. We actually have an extremely old towed artillery from the 1965, and considering the army composition, we'll need to get a better gun soon. Self-propelled artillery, the same. We're a little bit behind on the anti-air, but we're really good when it comes to the man pads, so that's the good news. Naval situation is not bad. When it comes to what we have researched and opened, we have modern frigates, corvettes, and destroyers. I already said in the beginning that I would like to modernize our navy, and we're probably going to start with destroyers. We can build a couple of the 1990s and then move to the 2005s, which would take excessive amount now, but we'll see how it's going to go. It is a plan for sure. Later on, I would like to build a couple of helicopter operator hulls and some cruisers, and then we can look at aircraft carriers in the end. But again, we need a lot of extra research slots for that. We need to be mindful 4 will be locked onto well, basically the industry. 1 is gonna go to the main battle tank, the second one is gonna go to the main battle tank, and once that project finalizes, we're gonna decide what to do next, and as we're gonna unlock additional slots, we're gonna assign them priorities. Definitely 1's gonna go to the navy soon after that, but we'll also need to look at helicopters, where we are also a little bit behind, and aircraft, though I kind of like the idea of working with United States, for example, and licensing their production, because we already do have that kind of equipment in our storage. We have, as I mentioned before, F4E Phantoms 2, and we had, where are they? Those the F5s. I don't see them here, but when I checked the possibility for deployment, we have additional ones. We have the F-16s here and a couple more. So, replacing the F-16s with newer models or licensing the production and even improving on it locally could be a possibility, and will probably be the choice that we're going to go with for the time being, because there's a lot of things here that you want to research, and we definitely do not have time for all of them, which is amazing part of the game where you literally cannot do everything. I mean, you see this in other mods like Black Ice as well, unless you're playing something like Germany or United States or Soviet Union. But for us here, it's going to be a necessity. Alright, well, I guess that concludes research, and we can move a little bit further to, well, let's look at trade a little bit. We do not have much production, unfortunately. That is the issue. Did I say production? I thought, maybe I said production. I'm not sure. But what I meant was we do not have that many resources. We have a little bit of fossil fuels, which is good. We can, I guess, improve upon that. We do have a little bit of technology metals, which is very valuable, and we have a little bit of steel. But we don't have any precious metals, we don't have any rubber or light metals, so we'll have to trade for it. Now, there is a lot of oil, for example, in Syria. There is a lot of resources in the Caucasus. Iran has a lot of resources, but it really depends on what's going to happen in the future and how aggressive we are going to play, if that is something we want to do. And we usually can get a lot of extra things in the game if you upgrade the infrastructure, which is something that's going to happen naturally. You can also improve. Here we have a lot of steel production in Eastern Thrace. I think also technology metals. Well, we can get additional resources. So that is what our situation is like. We'll have to work around it when it comes to production. Now, when it comes to production itself, we have a pretty decent amount of military industries. 20 is really good. I'm not actually sure. Can I show you some for comparison? All right, let's look at Russia, for example, if we can see. Yeah, they have, about 35. United States probably going to have, yeah, they have 67. But nations like Germany have 12. France has 12. Norway has 1. UK has 12. So having 20, is definitely not bad. Iran starts with 11. Okay, China has 58. But, we're at the upper percentile, I would say. So that is really not bad. And we even have 6 dockyards, which will allow us to start some decent projects when it comes to ship construction. We do have a lot of foreign ships here, but I think we're gonna design. I wanted to look into the destroyer, so we could potentially design one here and put it up to production. I think that you can have up to 5. Yeah, they limit it here as well. All right, so we could build up to 5, up to 2. Well, sensibly, we can build 2 or 3 ships, each having 2 or 3 dockyards. So having a destroyer here with 2 would mean they're going to be built around 2003 or 2002. Alright, well, we'll have to think about it. But destroyers are definitely something that I want, because we need to start building up a blue navy capacity. So production-wise, we're going to be okay. We can alternate, we can license stuff and build it as licensed. We can build some of these, which we have access to, but I'm not sure we'll need to have. I'm probably gonna avoid the ballistic missiles for now. We're gonna focus on just the utility and filling whatever we need. Construction is probably gonna be really bad. I cannot assume anything right now, but with all of the penalties that we have and with the issues that we have and the modifiers and all of the mechanisms, I have a suspicion we're gonna have like 10 factory stops. I'm gonna have to see. You have 15, alright, so we'll be happy if we're gonna have 1 full line going. I would potentially, what's the benefit? So construction tax revenue, but we couldn't do that. might be a good idea to start with something like an additional fossil fuel plant or two, so that we can turn up the energy consumption to additional consumption, because that gives you bonus to construction speed, political power gain, and tax revenue, and heavy additional consumption makes it even better. It is usually a good idea to run at max, so we'll see. But it would depend on how many factories we're gonna have available. Priority is gonna be civilian industry, as we are doing good on military, but we'll see what our needs are gonna be. Well, and now let's move to the army. In the introduction, I mentioned that Turkey had quite a lot of people in service, and about 500,000 people in active duty. That, it's also things like logistics personnel and stuff like that. Not all of that is fighting men, but it doesn't really equate well into the game, because while Turkey is using divisions, we have brigades everywhere. We have armored brigade, mechanized brigade, infantry brigade, commander brigade, and we have marine brigade. I actually believe we have all of those. Yes, we even have one marine brigade. We have some commandos. I can't really say much about these units at this point, other than I would design them a little bit differently, but they're not bad. Armored brigade, not bad, has 2 tank battalions, 2 mechanized infantry, and 1 self-propelled with a little bit of support, motorized recon, combat service support, and heavy engineer. Not a bad unit, but a brigade is really just a brigade. We would need to increase the size at least a little bit. The combat width is already 24, but I think that's because, yes, even support companies actually count. So we need to figure out what we want to do with these. Getting them to something like 40 would be probably good eventually. Mechanized brigades are quite similar. They're slightly smaller than armored brigades. They do have tank battalions, which is kind of interesting. I did not expect that. And they have artillery, a regular one, which is kind of interesting because the self-propelled artillery is actually much slower than the regular artillery. So I have a mind of removing this one and putting instead a regular artillery, because it's not gonna, especially if you upgrade the artillery that we would have, it would not impact us that much, and it would make the units much faster, but we'll see. Infantry brigade is the fastest one. It has motorized infantry. You cannot have leg infantry, if I'm not mistaken, in the game. They're really... No, actually there is light infantry here. I never really use them. I, just default to motorized. So motorized with a little bit of artillery, it definitely could use a little bit more support, which would be good. And we could add something like attack helicopters, or some additional... We don't have HQs, which is kind of interesting. They could definitely use with something like anti-air, which, yes, that's gonna be a big one for all of our units. The impact of enemy aircraft in this game is really heavy, so having everyone here get some bonuses on that would be really important. Do we have better engineers? And just a heavy engineer company and regular company. Alright, well, we'll have to deal with that. And then we have the commando brigade, which is just commandos and attack helicopter company. So, modernizing is fine. I never really understood why the commandos always suck so much. They're always very small units with nothing else, so I tend to boost them significantly, because the special operation forces aren't really bad, and they are just organized in these units which are extremely weak. They do not have any support, so it is a good idea to give them something. But eventually what I default to is I just disperse them, because they are just too weak to operate, and they're too slow. So their bonuses is that they have huge benefits in mountains, jungles, hard terrain like that, but does it make it worth? I'm not sure at this point. And last but not least, we have the Marine Brigade. This is something that is tied to the attack on Cyprus or attack on Greece. So we might recruit a couple more and have them prepared as a special force that could, land amphibiously and break through the enemy defenses and take Cyprus if it comes down to it. So from my comments here, you see that I'm not really unhappy with the composition of the units. We just need to work with them a little bit and see if we can enhance them in a bit more of a fighting capable units, because right now they're a little bit, they lack air support, they lack anti-air support, they lack the size and the oomph, the organization. So we'll see, but they're not bad, And when it comes to our army itself, we do have a ton of each of these units. So we'll split them at the start of the game or in between episodes. I'm going to split them into the 4 armies that Turkey is having officially, because I would like to mimic that at least at the start of the game, to have the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th army. And we're going to start, producing things based on what we are going to be missing once the equipment is distributed. This is weird. Carto viewing logistics for Turkey. You can probably view it for some puppets or something like that as well. Alright, I guess that's all for the beginning. I mentioned that we also, let me just show you also the navy, just for the completion's sake. It goes exactly as I mentioned it in the introduction. We have 24 frigates, we have 6 corvettes, and we have 10 submarines, which are all 1980 submarines, all of the same type, which is good. They will be easy to modernize, which, at this point, I don't think we can actually do anything with that. Oh, I can give them better, significantly better sonar. Giving them a better... Alright, even a better engine makes sense here, considering the production cost of them is 8,745, and this refit would be alright. Maybe we'll start with upgrading our subs. And here, when it comes to the frigates, is there anything that we could do? Oh yeah, we could modernize them significantly too, but the cost is 1,400. Some of these are probably going to be a little bit more useful. The anti-aircraft missiles, the anti-submarine warfare. It's not bad. Alright, so that's a little bit of a change of plan compared to what I said, because I thought that we would start by building the destroyers, but I think while we research some modernized technologies, we are going to do or start with a little bit of an upgrade to our ships and make sure that they do have the right equipment. And when it comes to the aircraft, I already mentioned we don't have any deployed, but we have a pretty decent amount of aircraft, but I don't think we can produce any, which is the main issue that we're gonna be facing. Yes, we cannot. We could design our own, which we eventually might do, but it might be better just to lease production from somewhere like United States, as that would be probably a little bit better for us. I wish I could see their technology, but all things considered, the 5th generation, we have the 4th generation white aircraft, yeah, but we don't have these ones. The ones that we have is 3rd generation, which is a 1965. So we definitely need to 4th generation white fighter, yeah, okay. So we definitely and desperately need to lease something if we want to modernize. And considering we do not have that many, it might seem like a lot, but we have really just a couple hundred aircraft, so setting up a production right off the bat would not be bad. Like the F-16, 240 of them. They are really good, but if they get, even if we just train them, we're gonna lose a bunch of them to training. So yes, we'll have to get some. All right, which will mean production, which will mean getting alloys, metals, rubber. All right, well, we know that's gonna happen. But yeah, I guess air production will be something that we will need to get up as soon as possible, just to make sure that we can at least replace the aircraft that's gonna crash during training. Alrighty, I think I've covered everything. There's a bunch of things that we're gonna look into. Yeah, economic interface, I think we've talked about that one before. This is the spending that we will need to, fulfill. Logistics we're gonna touch on during the game. Construction. Yeah, we looked at the economic preview, we looked at the energy, as I mentioned that. So, oh yeah, we're gonna have to import fossil fuels, that's always an issue. Alright, well, I think we're done here. So, if you made it all the way through the episode up to here, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in episode 2, where we are actually going to start playing the game, which is going to be fun, We have been talking about that for so long, so time to actually play it is gonna be soon. So till then, you guys, take care.